You think the most dangerous thieves break into your house wearing ski masks and carrying crowbars? Wrong. In modern America, the most ruthless robbers bring homemade potato salad to your Thanksgiving dinner. Smile as they ask about your career, and use your own bloodline to drain everything you bleed for. I always believed family was a safe harbor, until one bank call turned the rest of my life into a brutal legal war. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Maya Revenge Stories. We want to take a brief moment to sincerely thank you for your incredible support, but unfortunately, YouTube has demonetized our channel, leaving us without the budget to continue operating, which means we will not be uploading any new videos on this platform in the near future and are moving our operations entirely to Patreon. If you find yourself enjoying today's story, please support us by joining our Patreon community to hear even more gripping, exclusive true stories that are significantly longer, featuring highly detailed situations we simply cannot make public on YouTube, all brought to life by multiple emotional voice actors. You can easily join us by scanning the QR code on your screen right now, or by clicking the Patreon link located in the video description or the pinned comment of this video. Now, let us begin today's chilling narrative, as experienced by our protagonist, Phoebe Estrada. The air conditioning inside the main glass conference room at Verdant Horizon Design Group hummed at a perfectly crisp temperature, carrying the faint metallic scent of ozone and freshly brewed expensive espresso. I stood tall at the head of the long, polished mahogany table. In exactly 5 minutes, I was scheduled to pitch a $7 million urban landscape revitalization project to a board of extremely intimidating, stone-faced city developers. My presentation was absolutely flawless. My tailored charcoal gray suit felt like a custom suit of armor. Everything in my professional world was under my absolute, undeniable control. Then, my personal cell phone began to vibrate violently against the sleek wooden surface. It buzzed once, then twice, then a continuous, angry rhythm. I glanced down, irritated by the interruption. The screen glowed with an unfamiliar North Carolina area code. I strictly ignore unknown numbers during work hours, but a sudden, icy knot tightened deep in my stomach. A primal instinct, sharp and relentless, screamed at me that this was not a routine spam call. I offered a tight, highly professional smile to my anxious design team, murmured a quick apology about a sudden emergency, and stepped out into the sterile, echoing corporate hallway. I pressed the cold phone tight against my ear. "Hello?" I asked, my voice echoing slightly against the endless glass walls. "Is this Phoebe Estrada?" The voice on the other end was male. He sounded entirely professional, yet there was a distinct, nervous hesitation threading heavily through his words. "Speaking. Who is this?" "Ms. Estrada. My name is Marcus Vance. I am a branch manager at Peak Trust Bank in Asheville." He paused, and the silence on the line stretched out, feeling incredibly heavy and suffocating. "I need to verify your identity before we proceed any further. I deeply apologize for the urgency, but this is a highly sensitive matter regarding your private accounts." I frowned, my grip on the phone tightening until my knuckles turned white. I quickly answered his mandatory security questions: my mother's maiden name, the name of my first childhood pet, the street I grew up on. Each correct answer seemed to make Marcus breathe just a little bit heavier, as if he were dreading the conversation ahead. "Thank you, Ms. Estrada," Marcus finally said, his voice dropping a full octave. "I am calling regarding the commercial home equity line of credit that was just disbursed against your property, the historic mountain cabin." The brightly lit hallway suddenly seemed to tilt sideways. The blood roared fiercely in my ears, drowning out the ambient office noise. I bought that cabin exactly 6 years ago. I scraped together every single penny, worked grueling 80-hour weeks, and poured my entire soul into securing that small, secluded piece of peace. "Excuse me?" I managed to say, my voice suddenly paper-thin and trembling. "I have absolutely not applied for any line of credit. I do not have a loan against that property." "Ms. Estrada, a loan for $450,000 was fully approved and disbursed this morning," Marcus stated flatly. his words hitting my chest like physical blows. "That is completely impossible," I snapped, the initial panic rapidly morphing into a cold, hard, dangerous focus. "I have not even been in Asheville for over 4 months. You have made a colossal, unforgivable mistake." "I truly wish it were a mistake," Marcus replied, his tone laced with a grim, heavy kind of pity. He lowered his voice even further, sounding as if someone might be listening to our encrypted call. "The loan was not just approved. The entire amount of $450,000 is currently in the middle of an offshore wire transfer. The funds are being aggressively routed to an overseas account for what appears to be a highly suspicious, unregulated commercial business venture." My vision blurred at the edges. $450,000, the entire equity of my private sanctuary, vaporized and shipped across the ocean in a matter of hours. "Stop the transfer," I commanded immediately. "Cancel it right now. Freeze everything. This is blatant fraud." "I am trying," Marcus said, the severe strain entirely evident in his voice. "But you need to understand the reality of this situation. This was not a sloppy, amateur hack. The authorization protocols were absolutely flawless. The transfer order was authenticated using a legally binding electronic signature. Furthermore, it was secured by a high-level biometric facial recognition sweep conducted through a certified digital notary platform. The banking system literally recorded your living face, Ms. Estrada. It registered your direct, verbal consent." I leaned heavily against the cold glass wall, my legs threatening to give out completely. My mind raced frantically, clawing for logic in a situation completely devoid of it. My face, my consent, how could that even exist? "Who is receiving this money?" I asked, my voice barely more than a ragged whisper. "If this digital notary authorized the transaction, who is the registered recipient? Who legally holds the power of attorney?" I heard the distinct sound of a computer keyboard clacking rapidly on Marcus's end. Then, a very long, heavy sigh. "The power of attorney document was executed perfectly," Marcus said, sounding genuinely sickened by what he was reading. "The legally authorized individuals designated to receive the full $450,000 are listed right here on my master screen." "Who?" I demanded, the single word tearing violently from my throat. "They are listed as your biological parents," Marcus revealed. I did not return to the glass conference room. I simply walked out of the building, got into my car, and began the 4-hour drive from the city to Asheville. The highway blurred into a meaningless streak of gray asphalt. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my joints ached, yet I felt entirely detached from my own body, as if I were floating somewhere above the driver's seat, watching a stranger pilot the vehicle. This is what psychological shock feels like. It is not screaming or crying. It is a terrifying, clinical numbness. Despite the suffocating panic threatening to crush my chest, the cold, analytical side of my brain took over. I connected my phone to the car's Bluetooth and dialed Elias Thorne. Elias was a former forensic accountant turned private investigator who had consulted for my firm on a sketchy land acquisition deal 2 years prior. I did not bother with pleasantries. I gave him the bare, ugly facts. I needed him to start digging into offshore wire routing immediately, regardless of his hourly rate. The air inside the Peak Trust Bank branch felt stale, heavy with the scent of cheap carpet cleaner and old paper. Marcus Vance did not greet me at the teller counter. He met me at the heavy glass doors and immediately escorted me down a narrow corridor into a windowless, soundproof security room. The space was claustrophobic, illuminated by a harsh, buzzing fluorescent light. On the center of a cheap laminate table sat a thick manila folder. It looked exactly like a coroner's report. In a way, it was the complete autopsy of my financial life. Marcus slid the folder toward me without a single word. I opened it, and my stomach plummeted. Page after page of my existence was laid bare in terrifying, immaculate detail. My full Social Security number, 7 years of perfectly filed tax returns, my credit history, flawless and untouched. The paperwork was so thorough, it felt violating, like someone had peeled off my skin to examine my bones. But the document that truly made the blood freeze in my veins was the general power of attorney. The signature at the bottom was unequivocally mine. Or rather, it was a 99% perfect digital replication of it, stamped with the encrypted, unforgeable seal of a state-certified electronic notary platform. How did they bypass the biometric security? I asked, my voice echoing hollowly against the bare walls. Marcus did not answer verbally. He reached into his suit pocket, pulled out a digital tablet, tapped the screen a few times, and turned it toward me. "This is the mandatory video verification log captured by the notary platform," he said quietly. I stared at the high-definition screen. There I was. My own face stared back at me, looking slightly tired, dressed in the oversized cashmere sweater I only wore on holidays. The digital camera had mapped the unique contours of my cheekbones, the exact distance between my eyes, generating a flawless biometric match on the video. I looked directly into the lens, gave a small, almost confused nod, and clearly spoke the required legal phrase. "I consent to authenticate." The video ended. The screen went black, reflecting my horrified expression. I could not breathe. I recognized the background in that video. It was not a neutral office wall. It was the faded, floral wallpaper of the living room I had grown up in. The memories of Thanksgiving dinner, exactly 1 month ago, slammed into me with the force of a freight train. The smell of roasted turkey and warm cinnamon, the clinking of wine glasses. My mother, standing perfectly casual by the brick fireplace, holding up her new smartphone with an exasperated sigh. I could hear her voice echoing in my mind right now, sweet and utterly deceptive. "Phoebe, honey, look at this screen for a second, will you? I am trying to test the facial recognition feature on this new medical portal app my doctor wants me to use, and it just will not calibrate with my glasses." I had leaned over, I had nodded. I had repeated the exact phrase she told me to say, thinking it was just a clunky security test for a hospital website to help my aging mother. It was not a theft in the dark. It was a meticulously choreographed execution, carried out while I was digesting a meal they had lovingly cooked for me. They had weaponized my trust. They turned my basic willingness to help my mother into the very weapon that gutted my life savings. A wave of nausea washed over me so intensely, I had to brace both hands against the laminate table to keep from collapsing to the floor. I looked up at Marcus. His face was a mask of grim sympathy. "The money," I choked out. "You said it was currently transferring." "We caught a lucky break," Marcus said, leaning forward and lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Our internal anti-money laundering system flagged the destination. The receiving account belongs to a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. Because of the high-risk jurisdiction, the protocol automatically slapped a mandatory 48-hour holding lock on the wire to investigate for potential laundering. He tapped a thick finger against the manila folder. "The clock started ticking yesterday. We have exactly less than 24 hours to provide hard, indisputable legal proof to the federal regulators that this transaction is fraudulent. If we cannot secure a federal injunction before that lock expires, the $450,000 will clear into that offshore account, and once it hits the Caymans, it will vanish into a labyrinth of untraceable shell corporations forever." I left the windowless security room of the bank and sat in the driver's seat of my car for exactly 10 minutes, staring blankly at the steering wheel. A normal person would have immediately dialed the police dispatch. A normal person would have broken down into hysterical tears right there in the parking lot. But the sheer magnitude of the betrayal had burned through all my grief and confusion, leaving behind a cold, calculated, and terrifyingly calm rage. This anger demanded an immediate, face-to-face execution. I put the car in drive and headed straight toward the affluent, gated suburbs on the edge of town. I pulled up to the security checkpoint of the luxury condominium complex. I knew the keypad access code by heart. I certainly should, considering I faithfully transferred half of their exorbitant monthly rent directly from my corporate checking account on the first day of every single month for the last 3 years. I used my spare key to unlock the heavy, custom oak door of their top-floor unit. I did not knock. I did not announce my arrival. The sounds of clinking crystal and upbeat, smooth jazz music drifted down the hallway from the expansive dining area. I walked slowly, the thick, plush carpet silencing my deliberate footsteps. Then I saw them. My father was standing by the granite kitchen island, cheerfully popping the cork on a bottle of vintage champagne, letting the expensive foam spill carelessly over the sides of his glass. My mother was leaning over the counter, her reading glasses perched perfectly on her nose, enthusiastically pointing at massive, glossy architectural blueprints spread out over the stone surface. I could clearly read the bold, gold-leafed header printed on the papers. It was a design for an exclusive, high-tier spiritual healing and wellness retreat. It was the exact same pyramid scheme model, heavily disguised as a luxury meditation resort, that had been circulating through their desperate, wealth-obsessed social circles for the past 8 months. They were genuinely celebrating. I walked directly to the island and slammed the thick manila folder from the bank down right on top of their glossy blueprints. The heavy, aggressive slap of the paper echoed sharply against the vaulted ceilings, violently cutting through the smooth jazz. My father froze entirely, the champagne bottle still suspended mid-air. My mother slowly straightened up. She did not scream. She did not gasp in horror or guilt. She simply looked down at the official bank logo stamped on the folder, then looked up at me, and let out a long, theatrical sigh of profound annoyance. Honestly, you always have to burst in and make a massive, dramatic scene out of absolutely nothing, my mother drawled. Her voice dripped with the patronizing, arrogant tone of a kindergarten teacher scolding a toddler for spilling a cup of milk. We were going to call you tonight after dinner to discuss the restructuring of the family portfolio. There was no need to barge in here looking like a storm cloud. I stared at the woman who gave birth to me, the mask of the sweet, technologically inept mother asking for help with a medical app during Thanksgiving dinner was entirely gone. It was replaced by a cold, calculating stranger who viewed my entire existence as nothing more than a convenient checking account. Take a breath, sweetheart, my father chimed in, setting the green glass bottle down and picking up his crystal flute with an irritatingly calm demeanor. Nobody is stealing anything from you. We simply leveraged an idle asset. That mountain cabin of yours just sits up there in the woods, collecting dust most of the year. We temporarily borrowed the equity to secure the initial seed capital for this wellness center. The projected return on investment is absolutely enormous. You should be thanking us for taking the initiative. I took a slow, deliberate sip of his champagne, looking me dead in the eye with a sickening, unshakable sense of entitlement. Let us be completely realistic here, my father continued, gesturing broadly around the luxury apartment I was subsidizing. We brought you into this world. We paid for your private tutors. We funded your expensive college degree. We built the exact foundation that allows you to wear those fancy designer suits and design those massive city parks. Technically speaking, every single asset you generate is part of the collective family investment fund. We are simply taking what is rightfully owed to us, so we can finally secure our own legacy instead of waiting around for your monthly charity. Exactly, my mother agreed smoothly, swirling the golden liquid in her glass. Besides, we knew you would never willingly sign the paperwork. You are far too conservative with money, always hoarding it. So, we took the initiative. It was a harmless, creative workaround for the greater good of this family. And really, what are you going to do about it? Press criminal charges against your own flesh and blood? She offered a small, mocking smile, completely confident in her manipulative trap. We know you better than anyone, she sneered softly. You are obsessed with your pristine corporate image. A messy, highly public legal scandal involving your own parents would completely destroy your reputation at that prestigious design firm. You will accept this. The resort will be built, and we will all move forward as a family. They stood shoulder to shoulder, a unified front of narcissistic delusion. They truly believed they had cornered me. They thought my fear of social embarrassment and professional ruin would force me to silently swallow a $450,000 theft. I did not yell. I did not cry. I simply reached into the tailored pocket of my blazer, pulled out my smartphone, and tapped the bright red square on the screen. The screen flashed once, indicating the audio recording had successfully saved directly to my encrypted, cloud-based drive. I am not here to negotiate, I said, my voice as hard and cold as shattered ice. I am not here to listen to your insane, pathetic justifications. I came here to tell you two things. First, the bank's federal anti-money laundering system flagged your little offshore shell company. The wire transfer is completely frozen. You are not getting a single dime of my equity. Their smug, arrogant smiles instantly vanished. The color completely drained from my father's face. His hand began to tremble, and he dropped his crystal glass. It shattered violently against the hardwood floor, sending expensive champagne splashing onto his Italian leather shoes. I took a slow step closer, locking eyes with the woman who had weaponized my trust in my childhood home. Second, I continued, holding up the phone so the screen illuminated the dark space between us. I just recorded your entire detailed confession, every single arrogant word about defrauding a state notary and intentionally stealing my property. I am taking this file straight to a federal litigator, and I will scorch the earth to ensure both of you rot in a federal penitentiary. The elegant, superior facade finally shattered into a million irreparable pieces. My mother's face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly rage. She shrieked a string of vile, venomous curses that echoed horribly off the high ceilings. She lunged aggressively across the granite island, her manicured hands clawing frantically through the air, desperately trying to snatch the phone from my grip. I stepped back easily, completely untouched, watching the absolute collapse of the people I once called family. They were not my parents anymore. They were just two desperate, cornered criminals who had completely underestimated the daughter they created. I did not go home after leaving that luxury apartment. I drove straight into the heart of the downtown financial district, parked my car in a subterranean garage, and took an express elevator to the 42nd floor of a towering glass skyscraper. I was not there to find a therapist. I was there to meet Harper Quinn. Harper was not the kind of lawyer you hired to negotiate a polite, amicable family settlement. She was a ruthless, terrifyingly brilliant litigation attorney who specialized exclusively in high-net-worth, family fraud, and asset recovery. She wore tailored suits, sharper than my own, and viewed emotional attachments purely as legal liabilities. When I sat in her sleek, minimalist office and played the audio recording of my parents' confession, Harper did not flinch, gasp, or offer me a tissue. She simply opened her laptop, her eyes narrowing into cold slits, and went to war. Within 2 hours, Harper had drafted and filed an aggressive emergency petition for a temporary restraining order in federal court. Our immediate goal was to establish a judicial blockade, permanently freezing the disbursement of the funds before the bank's internal timer ran out. The legal chessboard was officially set, and we had just made a highly aggressive opening move. But the American justice system is rarely a straight, easy path to salvation. By noon the following day, we hit a massive, seemingly impenetrable concrete wall. The corporate attorneys representing the electronic notary platform fiercely rejected our claim of fraud. They filed a rapid, incredibly dense counter-motion, stating that their biometric security protocols had worked exactly as designed and were fully governed by state law. Harper sat across from me, her expression grim as she explained the brutal reality of our situation. "The system functioned perfectly," she stated, her voice devoid of any sugarcoating. "The video is real, the facial mapping is real, the verbal consent is undeniably yours. Because the digital evidence is technically authentic, the platform refuses to invalidate the legal document." The burden of proof now rested entirely on my shoulders. I had to definitively prove that I was manipulated into saying those words under false pretenses. While the audio recording I had secretly captured was a powerful tool, it was currently being aggressively challenged as inadmissible hearsay by the opposing counsel for the emergency hearing. Unless we found a concrete, undeniable paper trail linking the biometric capture to a premeditated, malicious scheme, the notary platform would not budge. That meant the temporary freeze would eventually expire, the money would vanish, and I would be left completely responsible for paying back a $450,000 commercial mortgage. We needed immense leverage, and we needed it immediately. Harper redirected her entire team of aggressive paralegals to tear into the corporate structure of the offshore shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. If we could expose the fundamentally fraudulent nature of the destination account, we could force the federal banking regulators to step in and kill the wire transfer indefinitely. For 72 grueling hours, we practically lived in Harper's conference room, sifting through heavily redacted incorporation documents, tracing blind trusts, and hunting down dummy directors. Finally, late on a Thursday evening, Harper managed to relentlessly crack the corporate veil of the holding fund. She pulled up the unredacted articles of incorporation on her massive digital monitor. The company was structured as a tri-party partnership. Two of the primary stakeholders were, entirely as expected, my mother and father, but the name of the third managing director, listed right there on the official international registry, sent a shockwave of pure, unadulterated revulsion straight down my spine. The name glowing on the screen was Julian. Julian was my ex-boyfriend. He was a slick, overwhelmingly charismatic commercial real estate broker whom I had viciously kicked out of my life exactly 3 years ago. I had ended the relationship after discovering his crippling, highly secretive sports gambling addiction, a toxic habit that had nearly destroyed my own credit score when our finances were briefly linked. Julian was the kind of man who would confidently lie about what he ate for breakfast just to stay in practice. I was deeply manipulative, utterly self-serving, and fundamentally dangerous. I stared at the illuminated screen, the horrifying pieces of the puzzle aggressively snapping into perfect, sickening place. My parents did not possess the technical intelligence to bypass a state-certified biometric notary system. They barely knew how to connect their own television to the wireless internet. But Julian did. As a licensed real estate broker, he knew exactly how digital property transfers and equity loans functioned. He knew the specific, obscure loopholes in the newly drafted remote notarization laws. He was the silent, invisible architect of this entire nightmare. Harper pulled the equity distribution schedule from the offshore file and slid it across the table. My parents had officially contracted to give Julian 30% of my stolen equity. They traded a massive cut of the money in exchange for him designing the perfect, untraceable theft. My own flesh and blood had actively, willingly partnered with the very man who had emotionally and financially abused me. They knew exactly how much profound pain and chaos Julian had caused me in the past, and they completely disregarded my trauma to secure their fake spiritual retreat. Sitting in that cold, brightly lit law office, any lingering, pathetic shred of daughterly pity I still held on to instantly evaporated. The deep-seated hesitation that had been holding me back, the quiet voice telling me not to destroy my family, turned completely to ash. I looked across the table at Harper, the icy resolve in my chest hardening into solid, unbreakable steel. I told my lawyer that I no longer just wanted to stop the wire transfer and protect my mountain cabin. The rules of engagement had just changed. I wanted to burn their entire lives to the ground, and I wanted every single one of them to pay the absolute maximum price. The moment the federal subpoenas slammed into their mailboxes, the arrogant bravado of my parents and Julian completely evaporated, replaced by the rabid, desperate panic of cornered animals. With the massive offshore account frozen by the temporary restraining order, their grand delusion of a luxury spiritual retreat was rapidly collapsing. But instead of surrendering to the inevitable legal consequences, they decided to double down. They fought back with a move so dirty and profoundly vile that even Harper was momentarily stunned. It started on a Tuesday morning. A process server showed up at my corporate design office, handing me a thick envelope sealed with a county court stamp. I opened it right there in the lobby, and the blood drained from my face. It was a formal notice of a mechanic's lien filed directly against my mountain cabin. The legal document claimed that a private construction firm had performed extensive, emergency foundation repairs on my property, and that I had completely defaulted on the massive bill. The alleged debt was $100,000. If I did not pay the balance within 14 days, the contractor had the legal right to force a foreclosure auction, seizing my cherished sanctuary to satisfy the fraudulent debt. I immediately knew it was Julian. During his time as a shady commercial broker, he had built a vast, disgusting network of corrupt contractors and underworld fixers. He had clearly paid off a phantom construction company to forge invoices, fabricate work orders, and slap a lethal legal hold on the only piece of the world that truly belonged to me. He was aggressively threatening to steal my home not through a banking loophole, but through brute legal force. Less than an hour after I received the notice, my phone rang. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail, but she called again and again. Finally, I pressed record on my secondary device and answered the call. "Phoebe, my sweet girl, please tell me you are being reasonable," my mother sobbed through the speaker. It was a spectacular, theatrical performance. Her voice was trembling, thick with fake tears and heavy emotional manipulation. "This has all gotten so terrifyingly out of hand. Your father is having chest pains. We never wanted this ugly legal battle. We just want peace." "You put a fake lien on my house," I stated, my voice dangerously flat. "Julian is just very protective of his investments," she cried, seamlessly shifting the blame while actively participating in the extortion. "He knows some very tough people. Phoebe, I am terrified for you, but there is a very simple way to make all of this scary business go away. You just need to call your aggressive lawyer and drop the federal injunction against the bank. Let the $450,000 clear into the offshore account, and I promise you, Julian will call off his contractor. Your cabin will be perfectly safe. We can all just move on and heal as a family. Do not let pride leave you homeless, sweetheart." It was the ultimate, toxic gaslighting technique. She was holding a gun to the head of my sanctuary, demanding the massive bank payout as ransom, and framing it as an act of maternal mercy. I ended the call without saying a single word. I did not cry. I did not break. I walked straight into Harper Quinn's office and played the extortion recording. Harper did not just smile. She practically beamed like a shark smelling fresh blood in the water. "They just crossed the line from civil fraud into federal extortion," Harper said, quickly grabbing her heavy coat. "We are no longer playing in family court. Phoebe, we are taking this to the big leagues, because the crime now involved interstate wire fraud, extortion, and a coordinated conspiracy to defraud a federally insured financial institution." The Federal Bureau of Investigation eagerly took over the jurisdiction. I sat in a sterile, heavily secured room at the local field office, outlining the entire plot to a senior special agent specializing in white-collar syndicates. The plan we formulated was not just about stopping the money. It was about creating an inescapable, razor-sharp steel trap. The trap required me to act. I had to convince them that their vicious blackmail had actually worked. The following morning, I called my mother back. I forced my voice to shake. I breathed heavily into the receiver, sounding utterly broken and defeated by the heavy weight of the fake lien. I begged her to call off Julian, whimpering that I would sign whatever legal releases they needed to let the $450,000 go through, as long as I could keep my cabin. My mother's voice instantly brightened, dripping with smug, victorious satisfaction. She eagerly agreed to my terms. Harper arranged the surrender. The meeting was scheduled to take place at a private, high-end arbitration firm downtown. In reality, the sleek office suite was a temporary front entirely leased and wired by the FBI. When the heavy glass doors of the conference room swung open that afternoon, Julian and my parents walked in together. They looked absolutely radiant. Julian was wearing a tailored designer suit, his chest puffed out with arrogant pride. Completely confident in his criminal brilliance, my father wore a condescending smirk, while my mother looked at me with an expression of fake, sickening sympathy. They looked at my slumped shoulders and my tear-stained cheeks, completely convinced that family loyalty and their ruthless intimidation had finally broken my spirit. They truly believed they had won the war. The fake arbitration suite was deadly quiet, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Harper Quinn sat at the head of the heavy mahogany table, sliding a thick stack of legal documents toward the center. Julian eagerly grabbed the gold-plated pen provided, his eyes practically gleaming with greed. My parents flanked him, completely oblivious to the fact that the two men in tailored suits standing quietly by the door were not private security guards, but armed federal agents. "These are the final release forms," Harper stated smoothly, her face a perfect, unreadable mask. "By signing these documents, you are formally acknowledging full legal ownership of the $450,000 currently held in the offshore Cayman account, and in exchange, you agree to immediately dissolve the mechanic's lien against Ms. Estrada's property." Julian did not even bother to read the fine print. He scribbled his signature aggressively across the bottom line. My father took the pen next, signing his name with a self-satisfied flourish, followed quickly by my mother. They pushed the papers back across the table, leaning back in their plush leather chairs, like conquering royalty. They truly believed they had successfully bullied me into funding their lavish lifestyle. Harper picked up the signed documents, carefully aligning the edges. She looked up, and the professional courtesy completely vanished from her eyes, replaced by a cold, predatory gleam. "Thank you," Harper said, her voice echoing sharply in the quiet room. "You have just formally executed a sworn affidavit under the penalty of perjury. By legally claiming ownership of those specific funds, you have directly confessed to orchestrating a synchronized wire fraud conspiracy against a federally insured banking institution." Julian frowned, his arrogant smirk faltering. "What the hell are you talking about? This is a civil settlement." "No." A deep voice boomed from the doorway. The two men in suits stepped forward, pulling their badges from their breast pockets. "This is a federal sting operation. You are all under arrest." Chaos erupted instantly. Julian violently shoved his heavy chair backward, scrambling toward the secondary exit door at the back of the suite. He did not make it 3 steps. A third FBI agent burst through that exact door, slamming Julian hard against the wall and forcing his hands roughly behind his back. The sharp metallic click of handcuffs snapping shut echoed like a gunshot. "You cannot do this," Julian spat, struggling uselessly against the agent holding him down. "I have a legal lien on her house. She owes my contractor $100,000. Your fake contractor was raided in his motel room at 2 o'clock this morning," the lead agent replied flatly, securing my father against the conference table. He folded in exactly 10 minutes and handed over every single encrypted text message you sent him. "You are facing severe federal extortion charges on top of the financial fraud." My mother let out a piercing, hysterical scream. The elegant facade she had worn my entire life crumbled into absolute dust as an agent pulled her arms firmly behind her back. She looked wildly at me, her face pale and streaked with terrified tears. "Phoebe!" she shrieked, her voice cracking in pure desperation. "Phoebe, tell them to stop. Tell them this is just a family misunderstanding. We are your parents. You cannot let them take us away in handcuffs. Please, sweetheart, tell them." I stood up slowly from my chair. I looked at the woman who had used my childhood trust to steal my sanctuary. I looked at the father who felt entitled to my life's work. I felt absolutely nothing but a clean, sweeping sense of closure. "I do not have a family," I said, my voice completely steady and cold. "I only have a home, and you tried to steal it." The American justice system moved with a swift, merciless precision. My parents were sentenced to 3 years in a federal penitentiary for wire fraud and biometric forgery. Every single penny of their retirement pension was completely seized by the court to cover the massive legal restitution and federal fines. They were left with absolutely nothing. Julian, with his prior offenses and the added extortion charges, received a severe 7-year sentence with zero possibility of early parole. 6 months later, I sat on the wooden balcony of my mountain cabin in Asheville. I wrapped both hands around a mug of freshly brewed hot coffee, watching the thick gray fog slowly burn off the jagged peaks of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The crisp morning air smelled of pine needles and absolute freedom. The cabin was now protected by a multi-layered, impenetrable digital security system, detached entirely from any public networks. My soul carried deep, permanent scars from the ultimate betrayal. But as I watched the sunrise paint the sky in brilliant shades of gold, I knew those scars were mine to keep. My life, my money, and my sanctuary finally belonged entirely to me. Fortified, peaceful, and fiercely free. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for listening to my story today. I would love to know where in the world you are tuning in from. So please let me know your city or country in the comments below. As a quick reminder, since YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, we will absolutely not be uploading any new videos here in the near future. We are moving all of our operations over to Patreon. If you found yourself enjoying today's journey and want to support the incredible team behind it, please help us out by joining the Maya Revenge Stories Patreon community. Over there, you will get access to our absolute best, longest, and most exclusive true stories that are far too intense to ever publish on YouTube. You can easily join us right now by scanning the QR code currently on your screen, or by simply clicking the Patreon link provided in the description box and the pinned comment below. Thank you again. Stay safe, and I will see you over on Patreon.